Before I formally introduce our webinar today, it's very unfortunate that one of our speakers, Dr. Lenin Raghavan, she is facing a medical emergency. I just got a text message from her wife a couple of hours ago. He won't be able to join us for this discourse. And I would request all of our speakers to pray for him for his speedy recovery. And I'm formally initiating this program today. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. And welcome to today's webinar where we are commemorating World Social Justice Day. This year's theme is Strengthening Intergenerational Solidarity for Enduring Well-Being, which emphasizes the importance of caring and respecting across generations to build stronger societies, sustain environment, and share wisdom for a better future. We had made a small attempt to discuss this critical theme by keeping the entire this year's theme in mind, that we will be talking about caste, class, and social justice as South Asian perspective. Social justice is not merely an ideal; it is a necessity in addressing historical and structural inequalities that shape our societies. In South Asia, caste class remain deeply entrenched, influencing access to resources, opportunities, and rights. This conversation brings together distinguished speakers, activists, and scholars who have dedicated their work to understanding and challenging these systems of operation. Once again, I'm grateful to our speakers. Before we begin, let me introduce our esteemed panelists. Ms. Khushbu Sharma, who is a PhD scholar at Jawaharlal Nehru University, which is famously known as JNU in Delhi. Her research focuses on intercaste marriages and violence in North India. Mr. Harshul Singh, who is an early career researcher, who specializes in nationalism, caste, and Dalit epistemology in academia. He is currently serving as the Vice President and Head of Department of Academic Affairs at International Association of Political Science Students. He's also my boss because I also am a part of IAPSS in the capacity of General Research Coordinator. We have Dr. Sheetal Kamble, who is a postdoctoral fellow at Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. She specializes in caste-based violence against Dalit women and labor studies. Dr. Lenin is not here. We are very unfortunate about his health issues. Last but not the least, we have Aishwarya Raj, who is an award-winning journalist and educator focusing on caste, gender, and sexuality through advocacy-driven and storytelling initiatives. Thank you so much once again for all. Let's begin our conversation. So I would request Harshul to come forward. I'll be throwing a question initially, and then you can carry on with the discourse that you want to discuss. Harshul, before I begin with you, the question would be, your research explores nationalism and caste in relations to Dalit epistemology in academia. And in what ways does mainstream academia fail to represent Dalit perspectives? And how does the rise of nationalism in India impact the discourse on caste and social justice? Over to you.
Thank you, Furqan. Thank you so much for offering this space and platform today. It really means a lot. And I think on the very context of this day, we are here for social justice and discussing about the discourse of caste, class in South Asia. I think there will be a lot of intrinsic dynamics that all of us would have to contribute and speak about, but also very critical in its nature. So, of course, I'm a Dalit individual myself, and most of my work comes around in studying higher education spaces and university spaces, particularly in India and across. So that has how my experiences and has my research been informed through my participant observation or through learned experiences. And I think to talk about caste in this context, particularly in university or in academic spaces, it's a very living entity. It's something very, of course, very inevitable, very institutionalized within a society and a state apparatus. But it comes more severely. It comes more abrupt when you talk about this in discourse of higher education or research academia or university spaces. And and I think these are more dynamic encounters and negotiations that every one of us sees. This whole idea of structural inequality, this whole idea of hierarchies, and this whole idea of othered negotiation, behavioral dynamics and differences. And it is, of course, how ironical, how cynical or pun it would be, or how odd this seems. But this is how the true nature, or this is how the true odds have been of our times. And you see, when I first came across this whole idea and working around this whole Dalit representation or Bahujan Adivasi representation in academia, it's all informed how I read discourses of Gopal Guru or Sharbila Rege, where we are understanding what validates theory in itself, what validates the perspective in itself, and who is doing it. So in that discourse, I was working currently to do so, or the discourse of deep harmonization in itself. And I think I call for, let's extend our conversation from decolonization and let's talk about our own hierarchies. And I think South Asian subcontinent in itself, we have way too much of these hierarchies overlapping themselves. And this is how, when I talk about DBA representation, Dalit Bahujan Adivasi representation, it is from these references and standpoints. And I focus all of this understanding to the point that it is experiences, it is plural universality perspectives of DBA community who have gone through so long and such dynamic nature of oppressions, and over the years, through their own experiences, through overlapping gender and class and other intersectional formats. So this is what I convey about when I speak about the question advocacy for DB representation in academia. And of course, I think in context to our conversation today, we can of course surely extend this to the part of how DB community is being presented, from the idea of enrollment of students, from the idea of faculty representation, from the idea of teachers representation in these spaces and position. I think which are very starkingly reminder of how subtle and how sophisticated this whole practices of casteism can be. Because of course, there's a lacking number of these graduates, there's a lacking number of these enrollments, there's a lacking number of departments or any academic spaces having enough student representation of DV communities. Recent IIM study that found out how IIMs were not able to find suitable candidates to fill their vacancies again shows us how subtle and how new liberal in vocab this whole process can be. And again, I think this also brings us to the aspect that this is how living, it's just processual, this whole idea of casteism, this othering or differential behavior, how livid it is, and how it is being embodied in its sense. So again, and when I talk about this, how dark and how cynical it can be at the same time, and how it just really speaks out to the reality of our time. This is really something to be very much baffled upon. This is something to be very much surprised by. So because this continues to go on, as even as we speak as of now, these practices goes on. And I think I would also like to put this conversation into the attention of the part how DBA students particularly experience their own representation, their own experiences in university spaces. I think in the last 2 academic years, we saw a stark rise in suicides of DBA students, be it Darshan Solanki, be it in the case of IIT Delhi in itself. And this is why the whole larger discourse of DB representation in academia also should be addressing to, because there's a lack of representation, there's lack of belongingness, there's a lack of imagination, there's lack of accountability, of course, the lack of relatability in this whole understanding. And how a tender age of these young students who join these important institute of eminences, which are government sponsored, doing very important work in India. And this whole idea idea of suppression, how dehumanizing someone experience can be, that mold their experiences to take their life. Of course, like we every year we see Rohit Vemula and Payal Tadbi's stark reminders for ourselves, and these are again reference points, standpoints for ourselves how these practices have been so inevitable. But you see how trivial these experiences can be, and they can cause someone to take away their whole life. How bright futures can be of these students, but again there's a lack of whole representation in this apparatus in itself. And again, I think to we know when we address this whole idea of representation, there would also be an aspect of appropriation and tokenization. You know how you are compensating this, in what terms, in what regards. Of course, there are SC/ST cells in university spaces to talk about, to cater to these needs and aspects. But how well are they doing? How well are they still functioning, and how effective they are? Because these students are still experiencing such haunting experiences from maybe the peer groups, or would it be institutional by faculty or something. So I think this is something I think we really need to understand. The whole idea of justice that comes around this whole conversion in itself, because when talk about be it religious, be it minority religious, or be it marginalized caste justice, or maybe it's anti-caste advocacy, how this would seen as something divisive in nature, because it is not about unity. But at the same time, when you talk about these caste masquerades and everything, they are tradition and how the system of Indian culture has been, or maybe the subcontinent's culture has been, and things ought to be, because there's an apparatus, a hierarchy, how one functions, and how the one on the lower rung ought to accept this dehumanization. So this all has really addressed and informed my understanding and my work so far. And I know it might be a little maybe one-sided perspective, or maybe a very or maybe one approach to it, but how I see in addressing all this representation, the idea of how any researcher, or how any student, or how any the debate community can overcome, can help in relatability, and do away with this idea of such atrocious attacks, or severity of the psyche of casteism, is through decentralization of epistemic authority. We need more focus, we need more writings, we need more perspective, we need more belongingness of understanding of our own community. And I think that is how we understand, or we would be able to reclaim our own agencies as DBA community. I know, like this would need a lot of critical reflection. This would also come with the premise that every DBA community has access to these things. This whole idea of egalitarian social sciences again. But I think this is one way how I imagine this, how we address the idea of caste, or maybe minority religious exclusions, or differences or othering that happens in academia and university spaces. So that would be my take. I think I'll rest on that note. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Harshul, first of all, for setting up the tone for the entire conversation by raising the issues like issues of dehumanization and the decentralization. When I was doing a bit of a homework on this webinar, I initially thought to ask this question. Like, I mean, I've honestly found there's a lack of unity among the communities who are on the receiving ends, right? Who never or made an attempt, or if they made an attempt on denouncing the notions of decolonization of casteism, and that class issue is still lacking. So thank you so much for bringing this up, and thank you so much for providing the discourse on this. So moving forward, I would like to request Dr. Sheetal Kamble to come forward. I'll be asking questions, Dr. Sheetal, to you. That your work on caste-based violence against Dalit women highlights the intersection of caste and gender oppression. Now, what unique challenges do Dalit women face when seeking justice? how do state institutions such as legal systems and law enforcement respond to cases of caste and gender-based violence? Over to you, ma'am.
Just and before I starting, I just give them a whole idea about what is exactly because I'm a Dalit feminist and particularly from the Maharashtra. So we have a legacy of Ambedkarite movement. So we are very clear about what is the perspective we wanted to bring into the society. That is one thing. My father was a Dalit Panther. He was a former member of the Dalit Panther. And even my grandmother was a survival of the caste-based violence. This all things, all history, I always carry in my whole life. So earlier I was working in a special cell for women and children. It was set up in the commissioner office because that was I was dealing with the gender-based violence, and gender-based violence is talking about only the domestic violence, rape, molestation, and all. But my understanding about the caste-based violence, there is when caste add into the violence process, all the patterns of violence change, and that is a basic challenge for me. So I when starting working within, I think 12 years, I started working in 2012. Before that also I was working with the theoretically, practically, and academically. I'm working on this area which is not being including the UN framework. So United Nations framework is talking about the four types of violence. They are talking of the type wide physical, mental, emotional, and economical violence. Dalit women's violence is a totally different from the others women violence because we are not consider ourselves as a homogeneous women. We are not a homogeneous women and we are the heterogeneous women. And our operation start from the caste and the particularly in the rural area where the untouchability practices is very common and it is visible. So that is the one idea I understand to restructure the violence theory. I look at the theory first, I work in the gender, and then I realize where is the caste, where is the Dalit woman, and what is the Dalit woman stand. So Sharmila Rege wrote about this Dalit woman feminist point. Uh, Gopal Guru is also talking about. But my history has come from all the Baba Saheb Ambedkar's legacy. Ambedkar's talk in a very different ways of caste. He talk about the caste is a source of violence. And that is the important to understand the different kind of patterns. Then is the behavior of the society. And another thing is how to deal with the atrocity cases. My challenges start from the atrocity, dealing with the atrocity cases and particularly Dalit cases, Dalit women cases. Because atrocity, you know that the Rohit Vemula is not only the significant case for us, because in Maharashtra, we know the lot of things are happening. Kerlanji is in atrocity cases. But this is the cases about the community-based violence, where the community involvement is it. I am looking as a different standpoint and central point of the Dalit women, where Dalit women is weaponized to for the atrocity cases, for the violence. So that is not invisible in any conversation. Even the Dalit movement is also be not have that kind of a conversation, and that is my research is in that process where I can bring into the table that is the how can you look at the violence in a different ways. One is the gender, one second is a caste, but intersectionality is not only the matter for us. Sources of violence where it started. Then second thing is we observe what is the behavior of the society, why the Dalit women are parade and naked in the public spaces, which is the particular violence which has not happened for the other women, only for the SC and ST. So this is the observation. It's not an observation, that is a real fact. So there is a particular patterns of violence reserve and preserve for the Dalit women and the tribal women. That's one thing. And the second thing is that this is the violence is a legitimized violence. So having Dalit women disrespecting dehumanization is very common funda and it is a practice. So every society and every community in the rural in a village, they accept it. So there is no matter to discuss about the caste-based violence because these all are based on the customary values and customary laws does not exist actually. Our culture. So then I try to understand what is the idea of the social justice come from this. All the discussions, all the cases I analyze. Even I was a part of the fact-finding committee since 2010. I handled so many cases of the violence and atrocity cases in Maharashtra, particularly Maharashtra, Gujarat, and right now I'm working with the Rajasthan also. On that basis, I written a book about the Dalit women and emerging the patterns of caste-based violence. I look at the three behaviors. One behavior is that how the state respond in this violence. They easily respond to the domestic violence because it's a universal violence, which is accepted in universal. But United Nations is saying that there is a different kind of violence that exists in the world, apart from the war, apart from the domestic violence, apart from the community violence, apart from the communal violence. So I wanted to bring that this framework. I wanted to break down all the frameworks, which is a theoretically built in a certain way, which is there no entry for the caste, and that was my contribution in the my academics. So the state and judiciary, they are first problem is that they are not been recognizing because it's a legitimized violence. The second thing is the law atrocity act is not implemented in a certain ways because the FIR is not in launch. FIR, you don't have, see, the Dalit women have a courage to file the cases, but the community is not responding. Even the other village people has not been giving support to her to file the cases because it is goes against the so-called the harmony of village. Suppose the women are filing the case, Dalit women file the case about the atrocity, then the state realized that she is disturbing the harmony of the village. The harmony is the based on the caste, where there is a Varna system is there and the particular untouchability practices. So this is the problem which is we are struggling. I am doing the last 12 years doing intervention in the some cases where we are realizing that this is the happen. Then other thing is the law, how the law is working. The law and judiciary as having the different kind of a perspective. These people are against the state. That is not correct. These are not people against the case because all women are talking about the democratic values. And democratic values based on the liberty, equality, and fraternity. And they are very clear about because they are carrying their legacy of the Ambedkar. They are carrying the idea of Ambedkarite movement. So these are all things are very challenging to be prove yourself. That is your identity as a Dalit is very clear in the rural. There is no issue. The issue is that how you recognize the violence because beating the after dominant caste is beating the Dalit women is very common. No one can ask, and Dalit women are more vocal about the caste system. And then, if you are more vocal, then you definitely you will be punished because you are asking for the question to the system. That is very problematic. If you're asking for the question to the system, then you are the punishable, and that punishment is happen in front of the village. And there is different kinds of n numbers of violence which is not recorded. One side. And the second important thing is that these are not recognized as a violence because it's a legitimized violence. So this kind of cases I identify, even I try to compare with other states also. It's not only particularly the Maharashtra, but I understand the Orissa Dalit women's position. I understand the Rajasthan Dalit women's position. Andhra Pradesh, the same thing is happening. So now the struggle is different that the atrocity acts is talking about the special court, but the special court is not existing in India. So we are struggling to get in justice. One thing, we have no idea how to deal with these cases. Another thing, the evidence and the rehabilitation. The court is asking for the law is based on the social justice is talk about the intention of the people. Why? What is the intention of the people to harass the Dalit women? And that intention is the evidence to prove that that is the atrocities happen and the caste-based violence has happened. Caste-based violence is a very umbrella term. It's not in the single word. There is only the caste people. Caste. Whenever I was conducting the sessions or anything, no. So all the university, one of the Gujarat University student was asking very interesting question. When the Hathras case was happening and across globally or people are discussing about the Hathras case, and the idea is that this rape is happened with a Dalit woman. That means the caste-based violence. I'm saying no. That is not a caste-based violence. This is the idea of the caste-based violence. Why the Dalit women as a weaponized and why the Dalit women are raped. That is a question is to understand the caste-based violence. Otherwise, there is a rape has happened with other women also. Molestation is happened with the other women also. Sexual harassment is happening with the other women also. Why only Dalit women we are considered? Because we belong to the Dalit community. That is one part. But the second part is what is the idea? There is a pre and post era. I need to understand so my research and my understanding in the thoroughly, even practically as a Dalit feminist, I always look at the violence in the two phases. One is the pre pre-era and the post-era. What has happened? Pre-era is the pre-era when the violence is happened, and the post-era when the law and judiciary is engaged with that. The pre-era, that is the environment is created like that. This Dalit woman is a very problematic woman who is taking the stand, who is asking for the question for the caste system. He is asking for the answerable for the dominant caste, and that is a problem for the person is there is a no unity. So you are disturbing the caste system. When the women and that why she is talking about, but she is not disturbing the harmony of the village. She is talking about the democratic values. And democratic values talk about the individual values, human rights values, and even the fraternity, equality, and all things. So my study, my understanding, my legacy, and even my experience last 12 years experience, I always try to engage with that. I come across with a different kinds of theoretical framework where we try to understand why the perspective is very important to understand Dalit women. Not because of the what is happening right now. Now all the people are thinking that the Dalit women and the black women are questions. Women are question are the same. I said we have a solidarity politics with them, but our harsh reality of the caste is totally different from the race because race is based on the class. We are not saying that is because our base is the caste where all my surname is start from the caste. My identification start from this. I'm a Kamble, that means you are coming from the Dalit community. It's very clear. So very visible in the caste system. So how can I allow this women to be talk about the equality fraternity? One thing. Then when talking about the social justice, we are not talking about only justice for women. That is very idea clear as a Dalit feminist. We are always talking about the social justice because this is not as always about my own welfare as a woman. It's the welfare of my own community. So when I talk about the social justice, my democratic values is very clear. We are talking about equality, and we are not talking about equality. Forget about the equality. We are first trying to tell the police judiciary that consider we as a human being. And then you can talk about the social justice. So social justice idea, we are theoretically planned in our discussion in the caste-based violence that we are talking about the democratic values. And democratic values is not based on the only fraternity equality, but it is a practice. And caste is a notion. It is a notion where the already is practice. Some state has a visible practice, some state has in visible practices, but practice is there. So we are looking at the perspective that how the caste one is the source of violence where women feel herself as a discriminated in a certain ways, not asking for the humiliating and asking, but just only the rape and molestation. This is her day-to-day struggle because her economies depend on the dominant caste. That is a harsh reality of the Indian village, where the woman is the bonded labor. She is working within a dominant caste land. One woman is the unorganized sector. She is working in some other areas where the dominant people who are hiring her for work. So these are the idea. So there is also socio-political context. We are looking at the caste-based violence, not only the social violence. It's the socio-political violence because economy is also very important to understand at the point of the Dalit women, where Dalit women are suffering because her economy is dependent on somebody. And the economy is depend on her own existence point, where she cannot ask she have no right to ask why she is paying very less amount wages, why she is available. And then thirdly, we are looking at the images and her images as built in the society. How it is, she is more vocal, she is more derogative, she is more aggressive women, where even the black women also have the same issues with issue within America because they are asking for the space. Looking at the social justice, we are also looking at the safe spaces where the women are safe, Dalit women. There are not safe spaces. Even though I am very upset when I was handling the case of Payal Tadvi, then when I was handling the Hathras case. So, hospital. This is problem with this not only handling the cases. The case is that how this caste is politicized in the violence process. Gender is when politicized, where the across world can support this women. But when the caste is politicized, no one is encouraged, even they are not having courage to say that, okay, this is the atrocities happen, we need to be part of this discussion. So that is my reality. It's a very harsh reality of India. I'm so sorry to say, because it is a day-to-day life of women. So the women are struggling because I belong to this community. I am the witness of caste-based violence since 2008 and 7. I was a part of the fact-finding committee of the Khairlanji cases, and I know that how it is politicized. It's not a politicized based on the only caste, but there is other factor is also involved. How they suppress whole community through the Dalit women. That is the caste-based violence, where the Dalit women is weaponized, and through this, mm, through her women's presence, all the communities oppressed. So community also have a no courage to support the Dalit woman in particularly caste-based violence. If they, even the same thing is happened, if you look at the Hathras case, how many communities supports are they gaining? They're not getting any supports from the community, because not because of the community doesn't want. The community want, but the structure of the society, the structure of the community is based on the caste, where you don't have an exit point, and even you don't have a resource to support our community. So we are looking at a different levels, where we are looking at the public space, not a private space. When you're talking about the Rohit Vemula case, it's a public space. Campus is a public space. Village is a public space. It's not a private space. So in that sense, we are divided, and we different from the caste-based violence to gender-based violence. Gender-based violence, it can be a private space, like as if you talk about domestic violence, it is there is only the husband-wife relationship is happening, only family relationships are there. But the caste-based violence is the whole violence. It is a community involvement. Other dominant caste communities involved in. So there is a different challenge to prove yourself. That is why you want a social justice. Even there is a compromise, things are happening. And my research is talking about how they involve Dalit man, how they involve the Dalit community to compromise this case. Because they have a very easy funda to compromise the cases. If you compromise, then you can live peacefully in your village. Otherwise, you have to boycott from the society. You can boycott from the village. So every time the Dalit women have a fear to lose her job, every time the Dalit women have a fear to boycott from the society, every time Dalit women have a fear to lose the support from the community, these are all the traumatical conditions have, she has going through this, and we are talking about this is the caste-based violence. And right now, after 35 years, we are struggling. Better before that also, most of the activists are working on the same issues. But last 35 years, we are not recognizing the space where we can understand how can you build together the solidarity politics with the mainstream feminist movement. We are very happy that right now there is a caste voices are coming from the different countries and different institute, and people are calling me and saying that Sheetal Kamble is doing the good Dalit feminist work. It's very happy for me. This platform is also happy that because I want to share. Even I was talking to the uh, Purko, that is I'm saying that I wanted to share my experience, because I know that is there is a lot of, even we're talking about the literature, we are not talking about the Babitai Kamble, we are not talking about the Shantabai Kamble, we are not talking about our Dalit women, those who are sacrificing their life to sustain in the village. We are talking about the Sharmila Reddy. So everywhere is a challenge for us to understanding our own position. So our position is that the solidarity politics with the mainstream feminist movement, where mainstream feminist movement are all agenda set with the gender. When we're talking about the solidarity politics with the black women, they are all agenda set with the class. As a Dalit woman, we are searching our place where we can say that our agenda is not only intersectionality, caste, class, gender, and religion. Our understanding is to build solidarity politics on the basis of the social justice and democratic values. So solidarity politics we want, because we don't want it to deal alone. We wanted to feel that other people should engage with our discussion, engage with our problem, but on the basis of the social justice and democratic values. So democratic values is very important for us. So whenever I research, I do research. Even right now, I'm working on the sexual harassment at workplace, where unorganized sectors women in India, mostly 90% are Dalit women are engaged in the unorganized sector, and there are no voices for a Dalit woman, because she always a fear about to lose their job, because she doesn't have that kind of capacity to earn. The purchasing power is no there, economic power is not there. So looking at the violence, socio-economic and political status, we are stuck with a socio and economic. Politically, we don't have any other kind of assertion. We have assertion. We are assertive. We are more vocal. We are talking about the Ambedkar legacy. We are talking about the Ambedkar Dalit legacy. Everything we are talking about. We are not saying that, but we are stuck till socio and economic. What is about the political participation? Our representation is not only for the reservation. Our representation is only for the we are exist in the society, and we have a struggle with the mainstream society. So these are all perspectives we wanted to bring into the discussion. How we can look at all the Dalit women solidarity politics with other feminist movement and even other platform where scheduled tribe women also is facing the same problem, but their problem have their ideological position totally different. My ideological positions come from the Ambedkarite movement. So I always believe that how social justice is very important, and the social justice is justice or not for my own individual, but is a justice for my own society. And we are creating an intervention platform for the Dalit women. Can Dalit women decide her own social justice, not other community, not social judiciary, or not any other law and judiciary will decide, or not or any other community, even her own community cannot decide. Dalit women can decide her own social justice. What is the definition of the social justice? Giving the punishment, capital punishment, that is not a social justice for us. So our social justice belongs to the annihilation of caste. And annihilation of caste is only possible when you believe in the democracy, you believe in the social justice idea of Ambedkar, and if you believe in the caste system. This is the whole conversation we are last 12 years we are doing the different kinds of intervention, and this is our perspective to work on the Dalit women. Thank you so much to creating the space for a discussion.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sheetal, for bringing such an insightful discourse. Specifically, your intervention on working on different issues faced by Dalit women. I mean, women do face discrimination when it comes to minority women, and when it comes to marginalized community, they faced a double whammy, right? So you brought these critical discussion, and you're working on this on these issues, which is very, very commendable, and I wish you all the best in your endeavors. So moving forward, I would since you also talked about some of the orientation of sexual issues that women, especially the women from caste, face, I would like to invite Aishwarya, who has the expertise on working on these issues. Aishwarya, as a journalist and a storyteller, your work focuses on gender, caste, and sexuality in relations to law and policies. What role do media play in amplifying marginalized voices? And do you believe journalism in South Asia is doing enough to challenge caste-based discrimination, or still reinforcing dominant narratives? The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me on this panel. It's a space where whatever this conversation would be is a space to actually understand each other's work, because maybe, for example, Sheetal ji's area of work is more connected to the grassroots. Some of us might be more active in the sense of research and policy along with the grassroots kind of work, policy and situation. So for me, so basically I will begin with a conversation that we earlier also had, that when we talk about the media representation, the caste communities representation in media, and instead of representation, I would rather like to go with the word involvement in the decision making, because certain times when we talk about representation, especially when social justice, this word has become a very trendy word that is used across universities and across movements, where the principles of constitutional morality or the democratic principles or the basics of social justice are not imbibed or practiced, but most often we see the word social justice being used very loosely here and there. So in that case, in such a scenario, we need to understand that who are the people who are telling the stories and who is telling whose stories. That is also very important to understand. Which of us come from a position of a epistemic insider to uh, build the knowledge that we are building, or to tell the journalistic story that we are telling. So there is a Oxfam report also. This report was published in 2019, and then there was a report again published in 2022, or sorry, 2000, sorry, 2022 or 2024. I'm sorry for mixing the numbers and words. So, what I mean to say is that these both reports point out that most of the decision making position within the mainstream media, and by mainstream media, I do not just mean the media where the very angry TV debates are happening, but I also mean the media who are labeled as so called not right wing or so called progressive media houses. Even there, if we have a chart sheet of the employees, and employees, if you're talking about employees, there's another two section. First are the reporters, the freelancers, the local journalists, the independent journalists. Many of these journalists, they come from DBA community, Dalit Bahujan Adivasi communities. Not many women are there, but they people who have studied journalist or who know journalism by practice. They could be a independent journalist with an organization, but they are seen as too difficult, too vocal, too disruptive when it comes to hiring them as employees. And that is why, again, coming to the Oxfam report, this report points out that in the decision making position, the presence of DBA community is um, clubbed to be 14% only. 14% is DBA community as a whole. So 84 to 86% are the non-DBA community in the decision-making positions. Now, we also need to understand what happens if in a media house, somebody who is in a decision-making position does not come from a anti-caste tradition or anti-caste, or is an epistemic insider to the anti-caste movement or the tradition that we are trying to build, or the anti-caste solidarities that we are trying to build. It very much reflects in how the story is being told. Like, for example, yesterday I was just speaking to one of my friends who is also a colleague. So we were scrolling. I will not name the media house, but it is very popular media house based in India. They do English and Hindi stories most often. So there is the clickbait. How the clickbait is there on YouTube. The clickbait speaks conversation with a tribal woman. Okay, and there is a storyteller who is going and speaking to quote unquote the tribal women as if the person does not have a name. So the language that we use in reporting, the way one is trying to build a gaze around a survivor. Uh, so if the storyteller is not an epistemic insider of the anti-caste movement, what happens is that there is only two gaze that exist in the media. One is the gaze of sympathy, wherein it appears as if the journalist or the media teller or the organization is coming across with a very severe, complex kind of situation. And another is total ignorance to whatever the case has happened. There could be no follow up. Certain media organization is only reporting because their boss now understands that this news is something in trend and we need to do it because we need certain kind of audience, certain TRP, certain viewership on certain social media platform. But because the position is not of an epistemic insider, the way the dialogues of the reporter is made in that sense, the introduction is made, how the camera work is there, how even, and we were also talking about how the interviews are conducted, because as Sheetal ji spoke about the harmony of caste in villages. So especially when we are reporting in a very rural area, and I'm very sure other speakers have also equally observed it, um, we, as a journalist or a storyteller, we cannot have that kind of expectation that in a society which is so much ingrained in the caste practices, and especially for DBA women, and especially for the Dalit and Adivasi women, uh, stepping outside of the framework that is set by the caste based, or rather casteist village, is going to bring very strong repercussions. The punishment of stepping outside of the caste boxes and practices that one has been put into, and most often the camera of the journalist and the storyteller only goes to the villages when there is certain atrocity, when there is a case of caste-based gender atrocity, especially talking about DBA women in that sense, within and in journalism. So the approach of journalists is that they are there, mostly is there, who are not in the position of an epistemic insider, is that they are there to tell a story. They work in a very mechanical kind of sense, that this is the data that one has, this is a occurrence that has happened, and we are here for, say, these many number of days, and we are doing an investigative journalism here, and our job is to get these quotations or these anecdotes from the survivor or the survivor's family. So what I'm trying to underline here is that, especially in journalism, if there is not a proper engagement of people across communities, especially the communities who are historically marginalized, who historically did not have the participation in the socio-political movement, the mainstream social-political movement, I would say, because uh, the story is now that the marginalized communities don't have a culture of their own, they don't have a knowledge of their own, but the knowledge, the practices, and the traditions are stigmatized and not considered as the mainstream. So what I'm trying to say here is that the mainstream knowledge building that is going on, journalism could only act as an intervening tool if there is a proper representation and participation of people across communities, DBA communities, and women and queer people from these communities specifically in the newsroom, within the newsroom. And second, the media houses must also, and there is no study and report that exists. I very much am looking forward, if in future we can get some kind of report on this, that media houses often, they on and off work with the local reporters, they on and off work with freelance or independent journalists. Now, not every independent journalist has that kind of um, socio-cultural backup or socio-cultural support to do the research, to do the conversation, to cover the story on their own. Even though if they might be coming from the community, they could be first generation learner who went to the university, who could be doing journalism freelance basis or independently. So now the organization does not provide the freelance journalists that kind of capital, that kind of support, that kind of money to report the cases that might have happened in their own community, where the survivor could be even of their own community if they are not an employee. So there is no report about how many what caste communities do the freelance journalists belong to, and how many freelance journalists leave the professional idea of doing journalism in an independent basis only due to lack of proper resources, not because they are not good journalists, not because they are not good storytellers, but because to work as an employee is also not favorable in their situation, because the tokenism is that if somebody wants to look at the story from angle that is not approved by the newsroom or the core team, the story will not be going that way. So as an employee also, if one is hired, that is mostly the case of tokenism, because 14% clubbed is DBA community within the decision making position. So this number itself tells a lot. Second is, but then they are not hired also if they are not something if they cannot be weaponized as a token within the organization, they are not seen as suitable candidates to be hired. But The organization understands that they would bring the grassroots stories because they themselves come from those communities. So sometimes the organization would approach them for a story on and off, but again the payment is not that for that storyteller or for that journalist to continue what they're trying to do. So here there is no lack of intent, there is no lack of skill set, but there is a lack of how the framework of media itself works. um, Again, when we are talking about media, since last 5 years, many feminist organization, feminist media has become also a word, and there are media organizations in India, not like mainstream media organizations, but they are also trying to build their own professional framework of working on gender issues or taking a feminist point of view to look at whatever is happening, and especially the cases of violence, the cases of bigotry, how prejudice is very subtly present in the institution, in the society, etc., etc. But if you look at the hiring policy, or if you just look at the statistics of um, the employees, the permanent employees and the freelancers of the staff members within the feminist organization also, there is no sense of diversity in that. And when I say diversity, I don't mean to say hiring employees of different communities from a already privileged, say, strata of the society, but I'm saying uh, there are different kinds of violence that exist. It is different for a Dalit women, different for a Bahujan women, different for Adivasi women, and even other communities are not homogeneous. So there is lot of knowledge. There are many things that could be done in the knowledge building system of the mainstream feminist movement. But very often one can also find that even the feminist organizations, they are not that diverse in their hiring policy, but they would rather have news when a caste-based violence happens. So most often, many of my colleagues and friends also who come from DVA communities, we often sit and we talk, and we wonder. We used to wonder when we were more younger, when we just started journalism, that are we just used as foot soldiers by the organization in building a very diverse portfolio of news publishing, because the payment, uh, the opportunities in the present and the opportunities that one will have is also not diverse. And why I'm bringing this anecdotal conversation little personal in nature, because these are the conversation that often exists in pockets who are affected, who are still trying to do a story their way, who are not getting hired because they're seen as too difficult, to somebody who brings caste into everything. Matlab, this is how it is termed by the very progressive spaces and very progressive people who run these media organizations. But again, the dilemma stands that how to also do something that you want to do, storytelling and journalism, and also work with these organizations, because not many, there are anti-caste, the Dalit Bahujan media houses in India who does advocacy journalism only, and they are very sensitive with the way that they report caste-based violence or caste-based gendered violence. But the funding, and there are many other complex things involved, that does not let the independent journalist have a kind of good source of income working with them, or say even a sustainable source of income working with them. So the only options that are left for journalists, um, even from DBA communities, to work in these organizations where there is no proper representation and involvement of us in the structure that they have created, and the enthusiasm also doesn't seem very positive to have us in the space, although it's changing maybe with the advent of social media and with the advent of Instagram, because the organizations are understanding that maybe for these particular stories, they need somebody who is an epistemic insider to cover these kinds of stories. So now they are cataloging the kinds of stories that they want to do, and also the kinds of employees that they want to be on the ground to cover those stories. So that but that's a very, but then also you can actually count such reporters on your fingers, wherein you cannot count the reporters who are appropriating the story on your fingers, but because it's so normalized within the industry itself. That is one thing. What I maybe expect from, and I would like to, for a change, see is that in India, the feminist knowledge producing organizations, especially when it comes to media and the development sector, whose mainstream agenda is just to work on gender, maybe they build solidarities in that sense, and they expand their working in that sense, that they're hiring the kinds of employees that they're having, the projects that they're doing is not in a way to just have the caste on their catalog, but to actually have these in ethical practices. For example, which can start from having an honorarium when we are going to interview somebody who comes from a caste underprivileged background. We will. There are incidents and there are cases, but I will talk about this particular one later when we come back to the conversation. Yeah, so that is what I would like to.
Thank you so much, Aishwarya, for bringing these issues of how there's a lack of representation from your community. You talk about the bringing anecdotal stories. I do have a anecdotal story for like 10-15 seconds. It's about mindset, right? It's about when you've decided, when you have preconceived that if we hired people from this community, or women from this community, uh, these issues will arise. So I recall a conversation when I was working in a non-profit organization, and she, I mean, I'm saying it's she. I won't be taking her name, but she categorically said, "Yeah, Furqan, whenever you look for recruitment, try not to hire females who are married, right? Or try not to recommend females who are married. There are a lot of issues. फिर आपको पता है वो लोग issues छुट्टियां लेती हैं, they take up their leaves and all that stuff. So this is the mindset. I mean, she was representing an organization that is based on media development. So you see, I mean, if you put people, let's say if she's running, she's having that decision making power, but yet she lacks a bit of intent of how to go about it, right? So these are very entrenched and engraved issues that are existing in our society. So we don't have a lot of time, because we also are truly blessed to have Mr. Ashok Meghwal from Rajasthan as well, who will be taking part in this conversation. So I'll bring our focus to now Khushbu ji. Khushbu, thank you so much for joining us for the first time on our platform. Your research focuses on the politics of intercaste marriages and the violence surrounding them. Can you shed light on how caste endogamy is still reinforced in contemporary India, or let's say in the contemporary world? Do intercaste marriages serve a meaningful challenge to caste system, or do they expose deeper structural violence within it? Over to you.
Panel, and I'm really inspired by the works of each of my co-panelists. So thank you so much for that. Now, coming to your question, and also to tell my entry point to today's topic, which is on caste, class, and social justice. My entry point to this theme is through the institution of marriage and how people in specifically North India, because my work focuses on North India. So how people in North India forge certain kind of romantic relationships and marriages, or not make them based on the caste and class and religion of people. So the thing is that based on my ongoing research, which is my PhD research in the state of Haryana and neighboring states, there are certain observations that I have. And so the first is that, first I'll tell you why I chose this topic. One is because of my own experiences when I went to marry a person who is considered marginalized from my own caste identity. And so the kind of ostracization and the kind of violence that both faced during That is one thing. But the other thing is that when I talk to people around me, everybody's like, okay, a lot of intercaste marriages are happening around. I know a friend, I know a relative. And so basically they create a background to say that now the caste hierarchy is towards the way of flattening down. And therefore you do not need the policies like affirmative actions and reservations, which have been, which has been placed by a lot of, hard work from the anti-caste movement for over, centuries. So but this is myth, because this is a kind of dominant caste myth making, because when you look at the data which is there, so you have Indian Human Development Survey and IHD, that is IHDS and National Family Health Survey data, which tells you, it is not very appropriate data, but still tells you, give you a rough sense of idea of how many intercaste marriages, and I'm talking specifically about intercaste marriages within Hindu religion. So it's around 5%, which as the IHDS data tells us, and it is around 10% as NFHS data. So it's a very small percentage of overall Hindu marriages that are happening in this country, and there are also irregularities in terms of which marriages get registered, which don't. Right. So there are a lot of loopholes there, but still it gives us a rough idea of how minuscule percentage it is. Right. So again. So when we see why are these intercaste marriages are happening in such low numbers, what I see is that this is kind of a collective pushback from the society and from the state, that is the Indian state, that pushes back towards these kind of intercaste marriages in a collaborative sort of way. Though we expect that this is a modern state, there are also kinds of affirmative action policies, and there should be a sense of encouragement that should be coming from the government and the administrative and the judicial institutions to pave a way for increase in the number of intercaste marriages. That is not happening. Rather, on the contrary, as Sheetal ma'am was also saying, the mindset of the administration and of the judiciary is very much against these kind of forging of these alliances, and that becomes more aggressive when the woman basically comes from a so-called oppressor castes, and the male is coming from so-called lower or marginalized caste. So that also happened in my case. And so I'll highlight a couple of challenges: what happens before marriage, what happens during marriage, and also what happens after marriage. So when these couple go to get their marriages registered, right, if the woman is belonging from the caste of the person who is sitting there to register the marriage, there are high chances that they would discourage the woman. They will shame the couple. They'll threaten them by saying that, okay, I know where you come from, I know your father, I know your uncle, I know your village, I'll go and tell them. And so these kind of challenges that are happening. I remember a case recently, a couple I interviewed. So they said both of them were Hindu by religion, but they were not ready to identify themselves as Hindu, and therefore they said that we do not want to get married under the Hindu Marriage Act. We want to get our marriage registered under the Special Marriage Act, because we do not want to perform the Brahminical rituals that the Hindu Marriage Act entails, which is the Saptapadi and taking those Saat Feras and everything. And the power to register the marriage under the Special Marriage Act only holds with the district collector. When they went to the DC, he said that no, but somebody, you don't know more than me. I know that you cannot marry under Special Marriage Act because it's only for interreligious couples. It's not for the people from the same religion, which is a lie. Right? Because anybody can be, it's a civil marriage law, and anybody can register their marriage under the Special Marriages Act. So that is one thing. Then I've heard from women, especially from the marginalized caste identities, from the DBA communities, telling that they have been caste shamed. They have been violated in the police custodies under the charges of thievery that they have when the couple elopes, right? The family of the girl might have registered a complaint, so to get her back by saying that she has taken so and so much of money from the house, and there is a case of thievery, right? So when police gets their custody, there is a lot of torture that happens both with marginalized caste women and men, especially men if they are marrying from somebody from a high caste group or oppressor caste group. So that is also happening. a lot of it. Then in Haryana specifically, there is a lot of talk about honor killings and honor crimes. But I would also like to highlight one thing that is also related to the policy, that honor killing is the extreme form of violence that happens in these cases. But there are everyday acts of violence, discrimination, exclusion, and marginalization that also need to be accounted for. And we also, when people demand a law against honor killings, we also need to see what are those everyday forms of violence that are happening. So people are excommunicated. There are cases of economic boycott. They do not get houses on rent. Their children also face discrimination in schools. They do not get admission in schools because when they hear that they are the offspring of an intercaste couple, and they ask what is the caste of which caste do you belong, and so their parents say that okay, but we don't want our child to identify with a certain caste, and they would still press on saying that but you have to recognize yourself under the caste of your father. So all these things are happening on an everyday basis. One more thing that is very specific in Haryana, um, uh, actually there are a couple of things. One is about what I call politics of subversion of gains. So as we know that under the Panchayati Raj system, there is there are seats which are reserved for the marginalized communities. And what is happening is that a lot of men from the oppressor caste, they are marrying women from the marginalized communities so that they can get them contest on the sarpanch seats and on the local representative bodies, and then exercise their rights as sarpanch pati, right? So and they claim that they are breaking the shackles of caste, but on the other hand they are basically subverting the gains that have been made by the marginalized communities for their rights. That is one thing. And the second thing is that because the sex ratio in Haryana is so skewed, they are basically marrying women, mostly lower caste women and marginalized caste women from far away areas. So you have West Bengal, you have Bihar, you have Jharkhand. They are marrying a lot of women from there, and acquiring a lot of power over their reproductive labor, their productive labor. They are humiliated. There's a lot of work that is happening on this kind of thing. That there is a lot of discrimination that they faced within the household by her partner, by their in-laws, by the entire village, by the entire community. So that is happening. And when they're questioned as to what, because you are so opposed to intercaste marriages, why are you marrying somebody from another caste from impoverished region? And they are saying that because we have no choice, but we cannot marry women from these communities in our own region, because then that will disturb the local power dynamics and local caste dynamics there. So that is also one thing that is happening. Now what happens after marriage is because we have seen that a lot of anti-caste scholarship focuses on saying that okay, intercaste marriages is a very effective tool for dissolution of caste identities, or if not annihilation, still the caste identities becomes blurred in this kind of mixed household. But is that happening? Because my research tells that is not happening at all. The one of the reasons is that the power of the kind of marriage in South Asia and in general, it's a patrilocal marriage, it's a heterosexual marriage, it's patrilineal. So all kinds of this kind of intertwining between the questions of gender and caste, they becomes very stark when we look at this mixed household where the woman, so there is a lot of gender division of labor that is happening. The woman is still doing most of the housework, she's taking care of the children, and it becomes more stark when the woman comes from a marginalized caste identity. She also faces a lot of discrimination from her in-laws. I came across a couple where the woman belongs to a Dalit community and the other person belongs to a Baniya community. That the man belongs to the Baniya community, and the mother-in-law of that woman asked her. So she had to accept the intercaste marriage because her son was the only son, and he was the only earning member in the family. So the family had to accept the intercaste marriage. But then they said that you will have to set up a separate kitchen within the household premises so that you can cook, because we are not ready to accept you as our daughter-in-law. And so that kind of discrimination is also happening. And after that, what also is happening is that once women who are entering into intercaste marriage after a lot of opposition, they consider it also as their moral duty to make the marriage work, because you have presented yourself as the example in front of the world, and no matter how much humiliation and discrimination you face inside the marriage, now you have got no social support to exit those marriages, and you have to present an example in front of the society that okay, we have done and we have to sustain it, so that more and more women can break those shackles and marry across castes. So all these things are happening. But one last thing that I would also want to point out is that when we talk about creating a law against honor based violence, we need to be a little cautious about not presenting it as a cultural issue, because it's not a culture, just a cultural issue. It's a Brahmanical issue. It's an issue of the caste. It is equally an issue of patriarchy. So we have to say that this is a law which needs to be put at par with the laws we have about against gender-based violence, and also caste-based violence, which is the Atrocity Act. So because there are a lot of a lot of advocates for honor-based crimes, they say that certain community, the honor-based violence is not so prevalent in India. There are certain communities, there are certain cultures which do that, which is not honor killing is not the only honor-based violence that exists in India. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Khushbu, for bringing this such an insightful and unique perspective, I must say. And on the notion of the issue of honor killing, I mean, I was surprised to know that it also exists in other communities as well. We used to know that honor killing has been weaponized in Muslim communities, right? Specifically in our part of the world. So it's very new for me to learn that this issue also exists. And I mean, you rightly said it. I mean, these issues should not be linked with cultural aspects of it. I mean, it should be taken into consideration as a legal and very deep-seated issues. I mean, intercaste marriage, the issues of intercaste marriage is very unique in this regard, because it has the commonality with the religion that I represent. It also says we also do have the issues of interreligious marriages, intersectorial marriages and stuff like these. So thank you so much, Khushbuji, for bringing this unique perspective, and I wish you all the best for your final PhD defense. I did have initial questions, so I'll be asking each of you to, let's say, spend 30 seconds or 1 minute to respond to this. How do you see caste and class intersecting in shaping social justice movements in South Asia or in India? Are we seeing progress? It looks like no. Are we witnessing a reassertion of caste hierarchies in new forms? Let's say the forms of digital spaces. I mean, we do have social media entrenched, or it's full of hate speech against communities of what you represent, or communities that we are representing. So over to you. Who want to go first? I would request Sheetal to go first.
See, I would theoretically, I was depending in it certain ways where I'm not looking as a intersections as a when we are talking about the Dalit women, because all the things are intersections has come from the base. The base is the caste. So in Indian context, and just particularly from I belong to the Maharashtra, where we have a legacy of Ambedkarite movement, and we are asking for the social justice and everything. How the caste is politicized and how they're shaping the social justice in its certain ways. Social justice is not only talking about the liberty, fraternity, and equality, but we are asking for the practice. So the all law is talking about to not be practice the untouchability is one of the source of discrimination in Indian context. So where it is? So one is the practice. So practice is the visible practice, invisible practices, and the practices with the behavior of the human being. Suppose I belong to the dominant caste. I'm not using the particularly the Brahmin caste. I'm saying the dominant caste. Every village have a different dominant caste, which is the operating in a such a way where the social justice is very problematic to recognize, identify, to do the intervention in the certain ways, where we always talking about that how we can shape this social justice through the practice, one behavior. Another thing is in the context of law, we are saying that when you're looking at the social justice, try to understand the intention of the human being. Suppose I am threatening to the Dalit woman, what was my intention? Is it intention is that comes from your gender? Is intention is come from the caste? Intention is come from your religion perspective, or intention is coming from your class? The intention is very important to understand the shaping the idea of the social justice. Then another thing we always talking about the consequences. What is the consequences happening? And that was various even the fact finding report we are presenting in a public domain, we are presenting in the judiciary. We are recognize that okay, how you're looking at a social justice on the consequences. Past consequences. See, everybody know about the caste conflict. Everybody knows the conflict theory, and everybody is interested to implement the conflict resolution. When you're talking about the public spaces, people say the conflict resolution is very interesting point where we can resolve the problem, but there's not consequences. How would the consequences? We are evidence. Then third is the evidence is also be a matter to prove your how you can become wanted to be equality and how can you fight for the social justice. Evidence is based on the this one. Another very important point is that documentation is very important where we are struggling because the perception of the state is totally different. Judiciary are implementing it totally, and as a Dalit woman, we are suffering in some certain areas. So democratic values, when you're talking about the democracy and democratic value, in bring it together to shape the social justice in a certain ways, where we talk about the language also, which language we are using for the social justice. Because we have a lot of discussion that the capital punishment, even the West Bengal, that is rape case was happened of doctor, and people are asking that is capital punishment. Is it your social justice? No, that is social justice. Yes, in a certain way, but capital punishment is we are not talking about only capital punishment. We're saying the behavior, people's behavior, caste notion should be there. So you should identify. Another very important point is uh, we are talking about the annihilation of caste. So our ultimate aim of democratic values, ultimate aim of social justice, ultimate aim of the social welfare is the annihilation of caste. And annihilation of caste means not getting married. Intercaste marriages can prove that is the annihilation of caste. Domestic violence and is not proving that this is the annihilation of caste. Annihilation of caste is the structure of society can be in an equal form. So equal form means the practice, some and there is some opportunities for the Dalit women and the spaces. So it is a space politics. So space politics is very totally different when you're looking at the feminist point of view. Because there people are very show off doing that. We did intercaste marriages. That is no caste. No, the practice is there. Still, I'm carrying the caste notion. I'm carrying my own caste when I getting married with the upper caste man. So these are all things we are shaping. And another last point is that this is practice, and even we are doing this. One important thing is the intervention in a law. Like as Khushbu rightly mentioned, it's very important to understand the honor killing. The customer laws is and the rituals practices and even the caste practices, all are we still exist. So we want to remove that through the context of democracy. You don't have a right to say that. You don't have a right to punish anyone in a gram panchayat, in panchayat system. So this is the very problematic, and this is and now we are struggling to be a public spaces in the campus, whereas we are talking about the this so-called urbanization. We are looking at the urbanization. Caste still exists because Rohit Vemula is one of the case we are across globally we are discussing. So the social justice system is it's not I'm not, but I have hopes for that. Okay, at least we are following the democracy. But
Thank you so much.
within a yes, yes. And
Thank
we
you so
always say that okay, democracy is only the weapon. Democracy is only the key to understand and implement the law. But law, there is a lawful practice has a problem. but we can interconnect it. So dialogue, having dialogue with the other team, that is also we are doing something. Okay, how it is democracy is very important, and the state role, decide the state role. There is no have a conversation because everybody have a fear right now in India. This we have a fear to talk about the state. This role
Thank
of
you
the
so
state
much.
is also
Yeah,
very important.
sure.
So thank you. This is the idea. I am just throwing this idea, and we are working on it last 5 to 7 years.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Dr. Sheetal, for bringing such a extensive perspective. Harshul, would you like to go now?
I think caste is, of course, inflicting our subcontinent or our country, of course. We second that. But of course, I think this would be a major understanding among us also how caste and class intersection are not leading to any mobility. A Dalit with capital still remains a Dalit. A Muslim entrepreneur or businesswoman or Pasmanda Muslim will remain a Muslim and he will be othered and discriminated in the market. So I think class mobility in any sense, in the end of the day, would not translate to annihilation of caste. It would only mean like there's a more sophisticated repackaging, how now we can certainly practice casteism in different manner. So I think this is also very subtle. When I say severity of caste has increased in this time, this is what I'm referring to. How sophisticated and subtle it has become in its nature. And I think reassertion of caste hierarchies. I think not caste hierarchy, but caste atrocities. These are reassertion of caste atrocities and discrimination in different formats. And again, the psyche of this severity has increased. I think this is what I want to put with. And just last point being that I think in all today's conversation, and of course Shashi was talking about solidarity politics. I think as a Dalit myself, I have always has a conflicted understanding of who extends solidarity to me, because we DBA people have to be very cautious about our own spaces and community and agencies. So first of all, who is right? Who is speaking and writing of these discourses? Are they just talking about uplifting people, or how Aishwarya would come back to, are they involving into these practices? So I think this is a very co-opted discourse, talk about social justice, and done by usually people from non-DBA community. But I think it's a larger discourse where we would like to reclaim our due dignity in that sense. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Harshul. Khushbu.
Yeah. So one thing about the caste and class thing is that in the mainstream, it has been presented as if caste and class, they are antithetical to each other. But if you look in our context, who are the marginalized classes in our country? It's majority of it is the DBA communities, which are again the marginalized caste, and you see the outcome of it in the form of policies like EWS reservation, right? Right. When you look at 10% quota for economically weaker sections, who are those economically weaker sections? It is completely it's like an end. It's like a reservation for the oppressor caste, right? It's all for the Savarna caste. Nobody from Dalit Bahujan Adivasi community can gain the benefits of the EWS reservation. So this kind of antithesis that has been presented, it's not true. It's all false, right? And the second thing you asked about the digital spaces and its role, I think you see a lot of, they have basically the digital spaces which has been created by the independent creators on social media, where you can see whether you can see the independent media houses. They have pushed the envelope of the discourse, whether it's about on the question of caste, whether it's on the question of gender, intersectionality, and even the politics of hyper Hindu nationalism. And then you see the pushback from the dominant caste in the Brahminical state, and in terms of the kind of bills and the policies that they are bringing in to regulate those digital spaces. You have the broadcast bill coming really soon, which will put a lot of limitations on what can be said on these digital spaces, and we know for who these laws are coming into place to curb the kind of dissent and the kind of protest that has been, and the kind of independent voices in resistance which are emerging from the people from marginalized communities. So yeah, that is my response.
Thank you so much, Khushbu, Dr. Sheetal, and Harshul, Aishwarya. Unfortunately, we were not able to have the company of Dr. Lenin Raghuvanshi in this discourse, and we wish him all the very best and for his speedy recovery. So, Harshul, your perspective on the representation in academia is quite uniquely blended uh, and solution based oriented, and it says that, I mean, that much of a community has been neglected because of their, the representation. Dr. Sheetal's work on ground level provides an epitome of how, grounded her work is, and Khushbu's work is unique in nature on the discourse of intercaste marriages and its issues, and then I wish her all the best. Aishwarya's perspective on the representation of communities or DBA communities. I mean, you all guys have one thing in common, that you all represent the same community, and you all can, club your ideas, you club your visions of how to at least get together uh, to bring some sort of a semblance among your communities. And the purpose of this webinar was to, reignite or rethink the ideas of how we can decolonize the culture, or the annihilation of caste and class in our society, which has been deeply affecting the very existence of our own community, of our people whom we know for decades. So thank you so much for bringing this up, and looking forward for valuable discourse. Kindly follow our channel on YouTube, on our social networks, and I would be requesting all of you to share this podcast, share this webinar once it's published, because we want to have a larger audience for our discourse, for the work that we are doing. Thank you so much, Harshul.
Thank you so much. Thank you.